Well, RIP to the past, what we all know as college football. This is Bite Size Sports co host Nathan with Kevy Kev. Or actually, I'm not even sure if it's Kevy Kev because, goddamn, look at that facial hair.
Woo! Yes, this is still Kev. I have not been replaced. Although we had that joke going in the clout route yesterday because I had a goatee, so it was like community fans. It was like, "Oh, evil Kevin has replaced me in the timeline." Yeah, don't worry about my face; it'll all grow back. I hope that's what they tell me. Nate, I'm happy to be here. You're driving this one today, brother, and I am happy. This marks our trilogy, right? We have
In a
long
weird,
been
yeah, in,
tracking the death of college football. You were saying?
in a weird sense, it is. I mean, just because, you know, over a year ago, it started off with Texas and Oklahoma making their way to the SEC after this year, and then the Big Ten being crazy, and USCLA, just might as well combine them. I mean, they're going to be travel partners. Let's be real.
Yeah. Your Midwestern schools in Los Angeles, makes all the sense in the world.
And now we've got the collapse of a proud conference, Pac-12, home to multiple Rose Bowl wins, home to Pac-12 after dark, where football games got real crazy. A lot of upsets, especially if you were a team like Oregon, Washington going to play in the desert in Arizona. Things got real crazy. I think in the span of this all, I think I saw something that Washington in like the last like 20-25 years had only won one time. I think it was either Arizona or Arizona State, but they had only won once, and they're not going to be playing that team this year at on the road, so that record's going to stay. But man, what else is there to really say here? Just with everything that's happened in the past about a month. It first started here with some things coming out about Colorado ended up transferring back ended up transferring back to the Big 12. That's kind of a welcome home. And then once that happened, things started to explode, and then we moved to Oregon and Washington, moved into the Big 10 at reduced shares, mind you. They will not be at full shares of money to begin with through this media deal. Just because I believe I was reading right, they couldn't necessarily snake out some more money from Fox, NBC, CBS, since Big Ten is no longer on ESPN. So,
Uh,
go ahead.
Sorry, I have a question for you there, just because, and I'm actually put it in our chat here. Which, by the way, as I'm asking questions, guys, feel free to fire away with your questions about the topics here at hand. But Nate, you said something that made me pause. It made me want to write this down. You said Oregon and Washington are coming in with not equal shares of the Big Ten, and I immediately, the first things that pop in my head, and I'll use Northwestern as an example because I don't want to be offensive to our current co-host, but um, maybe I would actually say IU probably is worth as much as Washington would be to the Big Ten. But Oregon to me, I look at Oregon and I say, how can you argue that Oregon isn't going to be worth as much to the Big Ten as Northwestern or some of these other schools that are in there? I feel like they're a team that's going to be a little more relevant early on. But I don't let me. We can save that for later if I don't want to throw us on a tangent there. But so I don't know if you want to talk about that now or save that for later. But that just kind of threw me off.
Yeah, I'll get to it in just a second here. And then also with Utah, Arizona State, and Arizona making their way over to the Big 12. So basically, you got four schools left in the Pac 12, and it's up in the air what's going to happen with them. And we'll get to some of the rumors later But just some quick thoughts, Kevin. What's your thoughts on this?
Goodbye, Yellow Brick Road. Oh man, I am sad. Listen, I am hearing Keith Jackson in my head, the granddaddy of them all. I know those days are already gone, Nate, but this feels like the final nail in the coffin of college football as I knew it, which is a lot, but hey, sports change all the time. I can't imagine what it would have been like to be an NBA purist and then have them introduce this chaotic 3-point line. I mean, so maybe, and we'll probably get into the more depth and the wider scope of this whole thing a little bit later. So I'll keep it focused on the Pac-12. There are 4 teams left, you say. What 4 are they? Can you help me there? Can you refresh my memory?
Cal, Stanford, Oregon State, Washington State. Those are the 4 that are remaining.
Whew, time is cruel. There is a time in history of college football where there's no way Cal and Stanford are left holding the bag, right? Those days are gone.
I mean, I don't necessarily think that they're gonna. At least Stanford, I don't think is going to be left in the lurch, just because that's a big bargaining chip for Notre Dame. Thinking about it, really. It may be a way down the road to eventually get Notre Dame into a conference of whichever conference ends up taking them.
Yeah, they're going to have to do it.
Yeah, I don't know about Cal, but the 2 that I feel really bad for are Washington State and Oregon State, especially Washington State. They have at least 8 figures, if not 9 worth of debt that they were leveraging with future Pac-12 network payouts. There were some promises and things like that. So going from, I'm not 100% sure, but I think their current payouts were about $30 million a year for the Pac-12 network. Going from that to potentially close to $4-5 million if they end up in, say, the Mountain West. That's going to be some chickens are going to come to roost there. If that's the case, that's what happens.
That's going to have a huge negative impact. And this, a bit of a tangent here, so you don't have to stay on it with me for a long time, but a coach, I believe it was a Missouri coach, had pointed out, what about the other student athletes? What about the non-football players that don't fly? Or if they do, they're flying commercial. What about the softball players that will now be playing a game, getting done at 9 p.m., flying commercial, flying a red eye, and then having class? We'll have to find the tweet and share it because it had a lot more detail than that. But it was that just sort of anecdotal stuff. Football will be fine. All of these football programs, like you said it, right? They're going to be in debt. I feel bad for them. They're still going to make $4 or $5 million a year. What about these smaller programs in these other sports that were really banking on a Pac-12 membership? What the hell is going to happen to all of those sports is something that we probably won't have time to talk about today. But that's kind of the focus in my mind, at least. Some of the issues are, these smaller teams, these smaller programs getting left in the lurch here. The Mountain West. You said something in the pre-show about Conference USA potentially being on the outs as well, right? So is there going to be a new conference that comes out of this? I don't know.
They, to touch base on them a little bit, they ended up within the past couple of years lost 6 members to the American and 3 members to the Sun Belt Conference. So they only had 5 remaining members. They added a bunch of people such as Liberty, New Mexico State, Jacksonville State, Sam Houston. They actually almost ended up losing Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee as well. But Middle Tennessee did not want to go to the MAC with Western, so the MAC didn't end up inviting Western Kentucky after that. Which, in my personal opinion, I think Western would fit real well in the MAC, just because everything in flux, and I don't think that they would be able to get back into the Sun Belt because they had moved from the Sun Belt to Conference USA. And with everything happening there, I don't know that the Sun Belt was going to take them back. But, that's neither here or now. But, yeah, I mean, I've seen all sorts of things that the 4 teams in the Pac-4
baby, for life.
Yeah, merge with because you have to have 6 members to be an actual conference, like in the eyes of the NCAA.
I remember that from NCAA 14.
So they, some of the rumors I've heard are, merge with some of, if not all of the Mountain West schools under the Pac-12 name, which also can take it, and it plays into basketball too, because I'm sure you're familiar with, when a conference makes the tournament, they get units. So like how much they're getting paid from the NCAA through the tournament, and the more games you win, the more units you get, the further you go, yada yada yada.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen I bring up the merger and then going under the Pac-12 name because I believe they would get the Mountain West credits as well as whatever Pac-12 credits that they have. And obviously, as we saw, San Diego State this year make a fantastic run all the way to the title game. I've seen them do that. I've also seen, and I think this is a real outside shot just because with the Big 12 going to 16, there isn't really any money or space for further teams, but I've seen, Oregon State and Washington State maybe end up there. I've seen, here's a crazy one, although I guess this isn't really crazy now at this point in time. Cal and Stanford ended up in the ACC. I saw
the Atlantic, or what does the ACC stand for, Nate?
Atlantic Coast Conference.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Just wanted to make sure that I hadn't lost my mind that Cal and Stanford are going to be playing at the Atlantic Coastal Conference. That's where we are, folks. We are officially in. Your teenage brother has gotten a hold of your copy of NCAA 14 and is just restructuring all of college football however he sees fit. It's awful to me. The logistics would be a nightmare. There is somebody who likes spreadsheets and logistics who is just salivating over this opportunity, Nate. But don't let me take us on a tangent. But before I give you back the baton, let me say a couple of things. One, thank you, those of you who are tuned in. We appreciate you. Get in the comment section with us. Let us know what your thoughts are. Ask us some questions. We're talking about the death of college football. The Pac-12 is no more. What's going to happen to the rest of these conferences? What are we going to do? Where will Notre Dame go? I'm going to force that one in at some point, Nate. And before you go, make sure you like, subscribe, all that good stuff, because right after us, we have another damn fantasy podcast. So make sure you stick around after this show to get some fantasy advice from our homies, Trevor and Dan. And I am done. Sorry, I got my little bit in there, Nate. Take it away.
Yeah, so it's funny you bring up Notre Dame because I saw a tweet or article today that they were pushing for the ACC to add Cal and Stanford. Don't know how legit that is, but that's what I saw.
Cal and Stanford in the ACC, right? You know how much I love that. Lee, welcome. Lee says 5 years ago, the big boys predicted just 2 super conferences. What do you think about that, Nate? How close are we to just Big Ten, SEC? In my opinion, if there's going to be 2 conferences, it's those 2. Let me know if you think differently. And are we headed in that direction?
I think so. I think at this point it's going to get to my prediction within 10 to 15 years, probably closer to 15, you're going to end up with a 24 team Big Ten, which you can split into two conferences, divisions, whatever you want to call it. And then you have a 24 team SEC. And then they're going to do their own thing in football, split off, and that's going to be your national title. Teams in the Big Ten that I could potentially see happening, which in this case, they have 6 spots available. I'm just going to throw out some teams. Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, Virginia, North Carolina, Florida State, Pitt, maybe, probably not, but
Pitt, they got some work to do. They'll be in the MAC, I think, before they make the super conferences, but
they'll probably end up in the Big 12 more likely than not.
The Big 12, God, this is where I start to feel like an old man, right? Like I feel like that meme of the old man yells at clouds, right? When I hear you say Pittsburgh should be in the Big 12, you remember that meme of Jim Carrey and Dumb and Dumber just doing that this is me when you say things like Cal in the ACC or Pitt in the Big 12. So forgive me. I'm going to try to not react so audibly every time. I'll just make a Keystone Light bitter beer face, but my God, yeah. So 2 super conferences, you think 10 to 15 years. We appreciate you, Lee, for the question. Nate, I give you back the reins. I'm just going to pop in as I see some questions pop in here. Of course, we will fit them in where we can because we love that interaction. Keep them coming, folks.
And for the SEC, theoretically, teams I could see are, Clemson, NC State, Virginia Tech, potentially, maybe Florida State. But if I was a betting man, I think Florida State's more likely going to end up in the Big Ten, as crazy as that is. Which, at this point, crazy went out the window. It's on the train to Busan or wherever you want to send it at this point. It's going to be dealing with some zombies down the road. But anyway, those are some teams I could think of off the top of my head because at this point, I'm not sure if I think never say never, but the Big 12 at this point is well positioned to be that third place conference there and doing pretty well for themselves. So I don't know if they would be a situation where they'd end up, getting the kaputs.
We've talked about this before, and I do kind of see, and I think I want to credit you with this idea. I believe you're the first one to mention this to me, where it would almost be sort of the way, and I don't know how many years this would take, but the way things are going, that the talent pool is going to start being more and more restricted to a couple dozen college programs, at which point there will almost need to become a new Division I, and whoever makes the cut on these 2 super conferences, and that, like, they'll be, as you mentioned, the only ones that can play for the national championship, and everybody else will be in what is essentially the equivalent to us now as Division II. And I don't know what the NCAA can do to avoid that at this point. Like the consolidation, do they draw a line in the sand here and say, okay, no more? 4 is the limit. We're going to keep the ACC. We're going to keep the Big 12. Sorry about your luck, Pac-12. We'll see you. We'll think about you on the days we reminisce about the Big East, and we'll keep you in our minds. We'll get to watch you in basketball days. You can stay a basketball conference. Do you have any ideas for how to avoid this whole super conference Terminator 2 Judgment Day future that we all see coming?
With NIL and just how things have gone, I don't think the NCAA really has any power anymore. They're a governing body that, to me,
So
doesn't really have any governing abilities at this point anymore. I mean, there's still some things that happen, but my so honestly, in my opinion, and I've been thinking about this for a couple days. Instead of just absolutely wrecking everything based on football, I really wish they would have just split off football into its own thing and then build the conferences from there. So you can keep the Big 12 we grew up with, the Pac 12 we grew up with, the, well, I kind of like this Big East more so than the old Big East, as weird as that is. I just like that smaller nucleus there.
watch it. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
I mean, to be honest, like
I miss my
know,
Big East, man.
at this point, like I guess it doesn't really matter. But honestly, what Notre Dame should have done is just joined the Big East when it fell apart, and then the 7 Catholic schools, plus Butler, and I'm forgetting some.
Oh, they could have done like a Megatron thing.
Yeah, like
Oh,
I think that
I
would have been
forgot
great.
the Big East had. That's right.
That would have been a great spot for it. Them to end up with all their non-football sports, just because they have this scheduling agreement. I mean, Lee's right, but
He's got a point. He says football pays for everything, though.
He's right, but I feel like there's some way you could make it separate, and you're still getting schools that get stuff paid for them, because basketball still makes money, not to the same level.
Yeah, I think that he brings up a good point. I think that's the but is that how many of these teams, even so, I'll look at locally. Clearly, you all know where I am, Columbus, Ohio State. How much? I bet the Ohio State football program brings in enough money to pay for everything that everybody else does year round, and then some. Basketball team making money. Is it making enough money to make sure that the volleyball team that is a loss, that they like? I'm sorry, I'm not trying to pick on volleyball, but insert golf, other individual sports here, or sports with smaller teams that aren't bringing in big revenue from ticket sales and concessions or anything. Like, are these basketball schools going to have enough to bring that in? So, but I don't disagree with you in the sense that like there's big money, right? Like, go ahead, tell me how you think you would do it, because I do feel there's enough sponsorship money maybe for football to stand on its own and funnel some of that money back. I don't know. How would you separate it? The floor is yours.
Well, before we do that,
sorry.
I was just looking, just because I was curious once you brought up Ohio State and profits and stuff. The 2022 fiscal year, they were the top spot in total revenue. And mind you, that when I say total revenue, I'm talking about the whole athletic department. They made about $251 million in earnings, and their total expenses were $225.7 million. So you're looking close to 25, 26 in profit, I guess. The football team made $109.2 million in revenue and basically $70 million in expenses. So really close to $40 million in profit. And men's basketball and wrestling also made over $1 million in revenue, but everything else, all the other sports that they sponsor, did not.
We need to understand more about why they're spending $70 million a year to play football, but that's not today's podcast.
I mean, it's probably real easy to find, but again, we'll address
no, I'm not suggesting there's anything crooked going on. I'm just like, goddamn, 70 million. I mean, they're still making 30 plus million, but it's like you're spending $70 million. There's how many kids on the team? That's $1 million. They've spent $1 million an athlete, except coaches, dozen million of that's going to the old ball coach. But
oh yeah, and really, Lee, it's 6 or 7 games a year, because a lot of times these athletic departments, they in these P5 schools, they try to go for 7 home games a year just to make, have that extra profit right there. Like I'm just going to use IU as an example here, just because that's my alma mater.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
Yeah.
Let's see what just an average Big Ten school pulls in.
Well, I was going to just go over the schedule here real quick, and then I'll see if I can find their profit.
Yeah, take a look at that. Thank you, James. Shout out to James. We'll see him on Thursday on The Bounce, talking hoops. As always, we just had a rivalry podcast yesterday on the Hall About Sports show. Did you find what you were looking for, sir?
Yeah, so just for IU's 2023 schedule, they have Ohio State at home, Indiana State at home, Louisville at Lucas Oil, which I think that Louisville game at Lucas Oil, that's kind of like a 50-50 split, because I know they also will play at Louisville, and Louisville will play a game at IU. And then Akron. So 3 of the first 4 are at home, and then really the 4th one is kind of a home game. And then they also have got Rutgers at home, Wisconsin at home, and Michigan State at home. And you make 6 actual home games, but really the 7th one, I mean, that's a neutral site game that's 50-50 split there. So I did find a report here for fiscal year 2022. IU made the 13 most revenue in terms of 230 public Division I schools.
13th in the Big Ten, right?
No, 13th overall.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So 166.
That's impressive.
Yeah. 166.8 million of revenue. 77.8 of that came from rights and licensing, including TV contracts. 61.7 came from contributions. 21.3 came from ticket sales. 2.7 from school funds. 3.3 from million from other sources. And they actually made a profit. They had 132.4 million in expenses, so they made about 31.4 million in profit, which is interesting because I'm also looking at this here, and this is according to the Daily Hoosier. The highest in terms of revenue was in 2019 at 127.8 million.
Dang, so, good for you, Hoosiers. Look at that. Yeah. They're making about as much money after the costs are taken out. They're about on par with old OSU there.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of it comes, again, from, donor contributions. There was an uptick in that. But if you kind of normalized it from, historical levels, they would probably drop to about 30th nationally from what I read. So, I mean, that's, they're top in some sports, but that's a bumfuck terrible football program making money over fist. I mean, like, I'll be real here. Like, I'm, IU fan, but let's be real.
You got it. We love it. You got to be realistic about your squad. So yeah, but no, I mean that was an interesting exercise because I genuinely was not aware at the finances behind a program like IU. So where else are you taking us on this journey as we bid farewell to what was once college football? Actually, I guess Lee has a question for you. Sorry. Nate, are those figures sports income only?
Lee, what do you mean by sports income only? Are you saying excluding like donor contributions to like the athletic department, because I those numbers I was saying was including contributions that made by donors, so boosters and all that fun stuff. I don't know offhand what the numbers would be excluding donor contributions, but I think it is important to include that information, because that's money coming in serving athletic department purposes. So it's not just, it's not just willy-nilly free money here, and it is, but it's not, if that makes sense.
In that instance, I guess to follow up on Lee's question, so those are donations made specifically for the football team?
Or the total revenue number I said, the 106, yes, not money paid for classes, no.
10-4. All right, sir, that is it. We are caught up in chat. Once again, guys, let us know. Fire away with some questions, comments. We will maybe collect a few here and save them for later. But, Nate, what else you got for us? We have about 20 minutes before it's time for another damn fantasy podcast. So I will get out of your way. I want to make sure we talk about everything you talk about.
Yeah, so, just this is some real interesting stuff to me here. I mean, I'm not a fan, obviously, of a lot of these. I mean, there have been some conference realignments that have been like really interesting, and like I haven't been too upset about. For example, I think Nebraska moving, they lost some rivalries, but moving to the Big Ten, that is a huge cultural fit.
Yeah.
And honestly, for me, conferences at 12 members, that is about the perfect amount for me, because then you have the two divisions, or in this case now with people moving away from divisions, top two teams going to the conference title. Like it's just a perfect amount there. But I would also say, if I had to really think about it, TCU.
Yeah, James. Not every day the Cornhuskers get brought up on a college football podcast these days, so we got to live it up. I agree with your take, though. It's a culture fit. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. When, the Big 12 started to fall apart, TCU getting called in there, that was a fit, harken back to the days of the old Southwest Conference, which that, we look at these conferences now and see how unstable some of these things are, how unstable some of these conferences are. Like, the Southwest Conference, the fact that was a 30 for 30, like, if that doesn't tell you how unstable and how ridiculous, and I mean, how just way out there that conference is in terms of like structure and stability. I mean, shoot, you even had the Pony Excess 30 for 32.
SMU, right? They were in that, weren't they?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just making this number or this ranking off the top of my head. So if anybody wants to, correct me here, I'm pretty sure when they existed, the Southwest Conference had the most NCAA violations. Like,
I would bet.
I mean, when you got guys like Eric Dickerson getting a gold Trans Am from, some booster, like, I mean, yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, just overall, I'm just not. I again, to go back to splitting football off, I mean, it's not going to be real possible to do at this point, but like go back to, for every other sport, let's say like 2000 conference, level conferences. So you got like Nebraska still in the Big 12, you got Utah not in the Pac-12, just throw out some examples. And yeah, that's right. And you know what? Arkansas wasn't too successful with that either.
Texas and Arkansas. That's Lee says Texas and Arkansas were at the top of the violations. Yeah.
I think according to the Pony Excess 30 for 30, I think at one point every team except for Rice was on probation at one point in that conference.
Poor Rice. Oh, that's funny.
But yeah, so just splitting the football off, and then you can do whatever you guys want with the conferences for football. But I don't know. I don't feel like I don't feel like that is ever going to happen, or we're ever going to go back to that. I have seen some people suggest that maybe, with the way things go, fans of some teams are not going to be a fan of being, a doormat, because somebody's got to be a doormat in the league. And you got teams like Oklahoma and Texas who have these rich history, multiple conference titles, multiple national championships. Like, are they really going to sit well, being 8-5, 7-6, 4-8? I mean, is that going to sit real well?
As a Notre Dame fan, maybe I should start a support group to help folks that have to deal with the fact that their college program is no longer at the level of relevancy it once was. Because since I was born, I think they've been in the national championship picture maybe 3 times. And one of those times was 1992. Okay. Like, you can barely, I don't think I was walking and talking at the same time yet at that point. Like, we're only twice in the last decade and a half has Notre Dame been in that picture. So that's probably the future for, I'm not saying Texas and Oklahoma, but you're right. And that idea of there's only so much room here. Someone has to lose games every year. These teams are going to have in-conference games. So yeah, what's going to happen? How are these former powerhouses going to feel about their long-term mediocrity, which again is another just negative point for why the hell are we doing this? This feels so short-sighted to me. I've noticed a trend in business in the current day and present day where everyone seems to not be able to really see past their nose, so to speak, and say, okay, hey, we're going to bring in huge dollars by signing these deals. I don't have the foresight to think about how this might ruin the longevity of our business. And frankly, that's not for me to worry about because I'm getting a paycheck. Some other sucker can figure that thing out. But that's kind of the vibe that I get with this. I can't understand how the people involved don't look at this and say, hey, this is a terrible idea. What we're doing is stupid. Instead, it's a race. It's like a game of musical chairs. It's just a race to not be left out. Meanwhile, even those involved, eventually this is all going to get screwed up. This is going to be awful, in my opinion. This is going to be the death of college football as we know it. And I have personally, I'm a fan who has been tuning out year over year as these changes have been made. I've already been less interested in the game as it goes on. So, I mean, Nate, what do you think?
Just as an example, because I agree with you there, at this point now, I watch IU games, kind of Boise State games, maybe some action in November, just because, there's not much else going on the TV on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays. And it's interesting to watch. And then some other games for gambling purposes. But like, I don't watch SEC games unless they're like playing IU in a bowl game. Okay, John. How about them? How about them? The lake hippies. Let's get rid of the lake hippies out of the Big Ten here.
Oh, John. So for those of you listening on Spotify or iTunes, John says, keep those coastal hippies out of my Big Ten. We play hard-nosed football up here. I love it. Yeah, there's nothing. John, how do you feel about Stanford and Cal in the Atlantic Coastal Conference? That's my favorite new part of college football. I love that. They can do an around the world in 80 days thing to play their away games on the other side of the goddamn continent. But hey, anyway, James says John's right. He also doesn't want coastal elites in the Heartland. Lee says probably won't get any wins except for when they play each other. All right, awesome. Thank you guys. We appreciate those comments. Keep them coming. Sorry, Nate. As you were, where were we?
I don't know. I got distracted.
I got distracted by those hippies out of my Big Ten. That was great. That's why we love it. Yeah, none of us understand. That's the comment of the day right there. I just picture Jim Halpert from The Office going, "What is going on?"
So from I was just looking just because I was curious when you were talking about Notre Dame and national title contention in your lifetime.
You're all over my head.
So just off the looking it up, I would say since you were born 92, 93, 2002 kind of, because they were undefeated until that Boston College game, and then kind of.
I don't want to talk about it. I want to talk about Ty Dillingham. All right. Tyrone Willingham was the coach. Pat Dillingham was the backup quarterback who fucked everything up. Sorry.
2006, again, the second year of Charlie Weiss.
Brady Quinn, Jeff Samardzija. Ooh, that was when Notre Dame started its run as a good tight end production unit. They started right around there to produce NFL caliber tight ends, but more about Iowa later.
I would also say 2005 as well, just because they had two close losses to Michigan State and USC there. Hashtag Bush push there.
Tell me more about that close loss to USC. I'm not bitter. I've gotten over it. Reggie Bush.
2012, which we don't need to talk about.
Is that the Manti Te'o year?
That was when they got blown out by Alabama.
Yeah, another almost undefeated year. I believe Lou Holtz was still the coach in 92, Lee. I believe that to be the case.
He was, yeah. Yep. Also,
another one. That was the other one Boston College ruined, right? Because that was 92 was the year they beat Florida State and then lost to Boston College. Oh, I don't like to talk about it.
I would also say 2018 when they got blown out in the Cotton Bowl by Alabama too. Maybe.
Okay, so we got 5 times in the last 20 years. It is better. It's better than I make it out to be. I am a well-known, well-documented pessimistic fan. Everyone knows this about me. Yes.
And 2020, COVID year. They played in the Rose Bowl against Alabama, and were actually more competitive against Alabama than Ohio State wasn't that year.
Hey, we got that going for us. They'll put a banner up for that. More competitive against Nick Saban than the Buckeyes. And then there's this year, because we got that kid from Wake Forest, right? And we got the best transfer quarterback in all of the transfer portal quarterbacks in all of the history of the world. And Notre Dame's going to win a championship. That's what I hear on the message boards. But, I don't drink the Kool-Aid anymore.
Right. And the one final thing I want to do here real quick is just some of the more interesting lower level transfers. So, not the Power 5 conferences here that I'm real interested in. So, the Sun Belt in late 2021, they added Southern Miss, Old Dominion, and Marshall, which was a real good pickups, as well as they got James Madison, which was a real, in terms of football, was a real powerhouse in the FCS. So the Sun Belt has set up themselves really well. They ended up kicking out 2 of the non-football members just because, honestly, both those schools are kind of terrible, and Arkansas Little Rock and Texas Arlington. I'm also real interested to see how in the future the Missouri Valley, shout out James there, Missouri Valley realignments go, such as they added, Loyola left. They went to the Atlantic 10. Belmont and Murray State both went to the Missouri Valley. For basketball, that's a fantastic That's a fantastic pickup. However, um, Murray State also ended up with their football in the Missouri Valley Football Conference, which is a little different. And some of those football members are not too thrilled about it because Murray State football is honestly terrible. Though they came from the Ohio Valley, which is honestly, the Ohio Valley might be the worst conference in regards to Division One football um, at this moment.
Yeah,
um,
you might be right.
Legitimately, they might be the worst one. But the Ohio Valley added a bunch of teams too. They added Little Rock. They also added Lindenwood, which jumped up from Division 3 or Division 2, excuse me.
Oh, I was going to say, dude, that is going to be quite a rough couple of years.
And they added Southern Indiana, the Screaming Eagles, or the Screagles, as it's shortened. Which
that's not a real school. That's Tiburon. That's EA Sports. That's one of those fake schools you can make when it's time to create a school. That's not real.
Well, they're in Evansville, so if you ever find yourself down there, that's where you can go to a game. They have a really
if I ever find myself in Evansville, call the SWAT team because I've been kidnapped. But what were you saying about their stadium?
They have a really nice basketball arena for the school that they are.
Well, in that case, I take it back.
And that's got some complications itself for Evansville, but that's a real deep cut that we don't really have time to get into.
Guys, just so we're all clear, I don't have true hatred from Indiana. It's one of those things where I'm from Indiana and I love Indiana, so I can make fun of it. That's how the rules. That's how the rules are. That's how it works. So, no offense to any of our wonderful viewers in Evansville. It's all jokes. We love you. Anyway, apparently you're not wrong about that fantastic basketball arena. So here we go. We got 3 minutes before it's time for the best damn fantasy show in the world that YouTube runs. So, Nate, one question and then hand it off to you for our outro here. Do we need or should we come back to revisit this again? I know this is a trilogy, but the cool thing about movies in modern day is no one gives a shit. Its trilogies are gone. It's time for franchises. So are we going to come back? Did we hit all of your topics or do we need to come back and talk about this again here in a couple of days?
In terms of what's currently happened with the FBS schools, I would say yes, we will need to see and keep on tabs where Cal and Washington State and Oregon State and Stanford and even potentially Notre Dame end up. Because at some point, I'm proponent of independent football teams. It's a great way to make your own schedule. But at some point, I think Notre Dame's going to have to join somewhere. But we'll see. So
I think they probably could have had some better opportunities where they're retroactively. I kind of wish they'd have gone back and maybe made some different moves earlier in life. I completely understand why they didn't do it, and as a fan, I have loved all those years of being able to watch my favorite college team on just basic, even if all I had to have was an antenna. So trust me, I was very happy for them to be independent and have their own TV deal for all these years. But at a certain point, there's a game of musical chairs, and you might want to at least put your chair in the ring. You can't play that game sitting by yourself next to the DJ booth, which is kind of where Notre Dame is at. You're going to be left scheduling nothing but the Thundering Herd and the Akron Zips every year, and then it won't matter how good your team is.
Mm-hmm.
So I am in agreement with you there. But yeah, so before I hand it to you for the our outro, just a reminder, stay tuned, guys. Don't go anywhere. Another Damn Fantasy podcast is going to be live here any minute with our dear friends Trevor and Dan. Check it out. That's where I'll be. You'll find me in the comments asking questions because I have a lot to learn. But this is not my show. I just am. I've been ingrained. I've been implanted with the segue and ad bug. So
Well,
I just want to help. So Nate,
well,
I'm muting
real quick,
myself.
where do people find you
At KevNevic _ and right here on this very network, Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, The Bounce. Check it out. Me and James will be talking all things in the wild world of hoops, and you can read my work at The Last Word on Sports.
With that being said, conference realignment is a tumbling mess of various options. And I'll leave you all with this. If you find yourself overdone with conference realignment talk, you can find the Traders Brewing and the Bite Size Sports car in Osaka season 2023B starting tomorrow. First race at Indianapolis. Traders and see right there. Traders and Bite Size both have a couple of race sponsors, so we'll see you there. And with that, we sign off.